Today we are looking at Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West through the lens of Friedrich Nietzsche's Apollonian and Dionysian ideas. In Nietzsche's The Birth of Tragedy, the Apollonian represents law, order, individuation, and the dream state, while the Dionysian represents chaos, intoxication, and the breakdown of boundaries and order. The Apollonian force in Once Upon a Time in the West is personified by the railroad tycoon Morton. His character represents the structured, cold expansion of the New West. Morton seeks to impose order on the wilderness through architecture and law. His goal is the shining city by the sea. Ironically, the man who represents the expansion of logic is physically trapped by bone tuberculosis. He's a prisoner of his own decaying form, relying entirely on the individualized power of money and contracts. The railroad itself is an Apollonian dream, a straight, logical line cut through a chaotic, dusty landscape. Henry Fonda's Frank represents the Dionysian in the movie. He begins as an instrument of Morton's order, but he is fundamentally a Dionysian force. He represents the raw, amoral violence of the old frontier. Frank doesn't act out of a logical business plan. He acts out of a predatory instinct. His introduction, The Massacre of the McBain Family, is a chaotic eruption of violence that shatters the Apollonian domestic peace. By the end of the film, Frank realizes he is a dying breed. He is no longer an individual with a future. He is a force of nature being phased out by the very civilization he helped clear the path for. Jill McBain is the true centre of the film, where these two forces collide and resolve. She comes from the chaos of New Orleans, a city of music and vice, and is initially a creature of instinct and survival. By the end of the film, she becomes the mother of the West. She takes the chaotic trauma of her family's death and channels it into a structured labour of providing water for the workers. She gives the order of the railroad a human soul. The character of Harmonica, Charles Bronson, exists in the liminal space between these two worlds. His music is not a structured melody, but a haunting, repetitive, and primal wail. It signifies the intoxication of the vendetta. However, his violence is not random. It is governed by a strict, almost mathematical code of justice. He is the artist of the showdown, crafting a perfect, inevitable conclusion to a chaotic history. In Leone's masterpiece, the Apollonian eventually wins. The railroad arrives, the town is built, and the law of contract replaces the law of the gun. However, the film is tragic in the Nietzschean sense because it acknowledges that the vibrant, terrifying, and Dionysian spirit of the Old West must die for the dream of civilization to live. Ennio Morricone's score for Once Upon a Time in the West isn't just background music. It is the battlefield where the Apollonian and Dionysian forces struggle. The Dionysian harmonica's wail. The man with the harmonica theme is the ultimate expression of the Dionysian. The harmonica is portable, breath-driven and primal. It produces a distorted, piercing sound that mimics a human cry or a dying animal. It disrupts the order of any scene it enters. It represents a raw, obsessive will for vengeance that exists out of logic or law. It is the intoxication of a man who has become a ghost, driven only by a single repetitive impulse. In contrast, Jill McBain's theme is lush, orchestratal, and highly structured. The wordless vocals represent the ideal or the dream state. It is ethereal and beautiful, elevating the mundane dirt of the West into a grand, mystic vision. It follows a sophisticated melodic arc. This is the music of civilization. It suggests a future that is organized, fertile, and harmonious. It is the shining city that Morton dreams of, but given a heartbeat. To represent Frank, Morricone used a distorted electric guitar, a jarring modern sound for a 19th century setting. It represents a corrupted Dionysian force. Violence that has been bought and paid for by the railroad, yet remains jagged and unpredictable. In the film's climax, as the railroad finally arrives and harmonica rides away, the themes merge. The raw, gritty sounds of the frontier are swallowed up by the sweeping, operatic grandeur of the orchestra. The tragedy is audible. The wild, individualistic music of the gunslingers fades out, leaving only the collective, organized anthem of the new world.